Good evening, friends. Welcome to the India Power Talk. At the outset, I thank you all for your supportive messages on my previous talks, and I look forward to receiving more from you. As you know, India Power Talk is an initiative to wherein we invite international thought leaders and domain experts to create an easily accessible digital reservoir of their insights, experiences, and strategies on how to revive Indian economy. This would benefit not just Indian entrepreneurs, but also international business, investors, strategic partners who are part of or intend to invest in India. We would be inviting entrepreneurs, economists, professors, investment bankers, scientists, lawyers, chartered accountants, thought leaders, and professionals with experience in diverse sectors who could contribute on the subject. Steve Jobs was a master at looking into future and observed that everyone here has the sense that right now is one of those moments wherein we are influencing the future. Today, convergence of technologies aimed at human betterment is more than a buzzword and it certainly has the power to influence our future. And to talk on this live subject, we have a highly distinguished guest. But before I ask her to speak her mind, let me take the privilege of giving a brief introduction to her illustrious career. A pioneering economist and technology futurist, Navroop Sahdev is the founder and CEO of the Digital Economist, a global impact organization steering tech convergence for human-centered digital economy in line with the Sustainable Development Goals. A fellow at MIT Connection Science, Navroop is a unique thought leader in the emerging tech space. Navroop is frequently interviewed by Forbes as a subject matter expert on the economies of emerging tech. She was listed as one of the top blockchain influencers in 2018 by Media Shower. A holder of 3 masters in IP management, economies of innovation, and applied economics. She has worked at Harvard University and the United Nations Environment Program. In 2019, she co-authored Blockchain Economies, the first book on the economies of blockchain, and Hyperledger, Blockchain for Business. Blockchain for Business online course, which she has trained over 160,000 entrepreneurs globally. Navroop, heartiest welcome to the India Power Talk. Could you begin by sharing your views on the importance of convergence of technologies and future of innovation?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think, Nitin, thank you for that question. I think the convergence of technologies is going to be the key driver for the future of innovation, which is really what we're focusing on as well within the Digital Economist. And there's a reason for that. The more interconnected you get, the similar the environment becomes for different players, the more convergence dynamics you see. Right, the notion of technological convergence comes from biological complexity and biological convergence, which is where different species which are operating in the same environment tend to develop similar characteristics. Right, like plants that grow in a desert all tend to develop a feature around saving water, going without a lot of water usage. Right, so and that applies to humans and applies to other species as well. So if you look at the literature, that's where the origin of the term is. Another example of convergence of technologies in particular would be telecommunications and the internet. Right. So over time, like your phones, they converge, put in the satellite technologies, right, and at the same time, all the others around geolocation, cameras, and photos, videos, and all of that stuff. So and I think those are the sorts of dynamics that become very interesting when you are serious about innovating over and beyond just marginal innovation, right? When we're talking about disruptive innovation, you necessarily need a host of technologies sort of working in tandem towards driving that.
I see. Great. Now, you have so aptly said that it is not about one technology, but what host of technologies can do together. That's the game changer, I guess. Let me ask you by asking this question: what was the key inspiration that made you steer technologies for human and planetary betterment in line with the Sustainable Development Goals?
Yeah, that's a good question. Talking about the purpose and mission as an entrepreneur and the organization you kind of set out to build really is something that reverberates throughout I think, the lifetime of the organization and beyond. So to answer your question, my learning in the blockchain space and emerging technologies over the past 5 years has been that um, it takes more than just one component to be the game changer. So a single technology in isolation usually cannot move things a lot. So coming from a practitioner point of view, what we're seeing is if everything else remains the same, a single technology can't really do much. In fact, it's even hard to drive the adoption of a single technology. So it's really the host of these technologies and the look and the feel of it, starts to change. An example I usually give is your iPhone. Every single technology that and you quoted Steve Jobs, right, went into it, existed before the iPhone existed. But it's the way you put these together, right? So innovation is about connecting new dots. And I think to kind of go back to the previous and our starting point around what that means to the future of innovation, I think what we're looking at is a much more of an acceleration towards that convergence, because currently the world has a tremendously shared experience in tackling the pandemic. So those interdependencies, regardless of the attitudes and handling of different governments, have been brought to the forth. And a lot of folks who previously perhaps didn't pay attention to it, how, for example, our supply networks are integrated and interdependent. Viruses spread within a single day, given the mobility of humans across the world, and how encroaching upon ecosystems and biodiversity continues to be a huge challenge in our fight towards tackling climate change. So what that means is all of that has been now accelerated, and I think we will see, and that's something we are beginning to observe already, a lot of purpose-driven entrepreneurs that are focused on solving some of the biggest challenges, right? Paul Romer, he's an economist, he said a crisis is a terrible thing to waste. So there's a lot of innovation that pours out. So I think in that sense, it's actually a pretty exciting time.
Great. Could you, thanks Navroop for that, really great insight. Could you now share your thoughts on your mission of driving tech convergence towards human-centered digital economy, and also the 5 key pillars of this economy which you have been propagating?
Right. So let me start with talking about what those 5 pillars are, just for our audience. So the first of all, sustainability, taking care of our home, one planet. Second is equity, by which we mean beyond just equality, because equal would vary depending on who the party is that we are talking about, right? Transparency in institutions, in governments, in our key pillars of the society, right? Mm-hmm. And then we have radical collaboration, which is a call to action for all of the stakeholders to contribute and leapfrog towards that future. So when we talk about the convergence of technologies, what we're effectively saying is that it's not just a single pillar or a single technology that is what it's going to take, but in fact a host of these together and them sort of working together. So that is the core mission of the Digital Economist as an impact platform. And what we do is we took on to ourselves to deliver that mission and not just talk about it, right? So actually build the products and services and run the programs towards that. So we have something we call the PSK offering. So which we believe that every platform needs to have. That is future forward, a digital product that is scalable, a service offering that is focused on current stakeholders. So how do you move the needle? And then finally, the programs which are focused on humans to power these, because ultimately it's about humans. So I take a slightly different, or perhaps drastically different, depending on where you are, on your own thinking about economics, that it shouldn't just be focused on capital and economic growth, but it should ultimately be towards human betterment, right? So 15 years ago, when I first had my very first textbook in economics, it said there are 4 factors of production: land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. And it's interesting because I don't think labor should be a factor of production. I think humans should be the ultimate human betterment. The improvement of the human condition should be the ultimate goal of all economics and what we do, both at the individual level, but then at the planetary level. I think the intermediate levels for me are less relevant in the current climate.
But that's really very deep thought that you outlined. But I'm keen to know, Navroop, how are you going about building resilient and anti-fragile companies that share your vision of human-centered digital economy?
Yeah, so thank you for asking that. Actually, I forgot to mention that we also run a Center of Excellence on Human-Centered Digital Economy. So what that does is I see this as a magnet where we pull and attract some of the top minds, scientists, practitioners, industry leaders, technology futurists, towards working on what it's going to take to build systems that are not just resilient. That means that they are able to absorb shocks as things change, as the global economy is currently going through a lot of changes, or what we call the triple crisis: the health, the economic, and the social crisis, particularly in the United States, as you saw with the protests, but not just, also around the world. And our call to action is to build systems that go a step beyond, systems that are anti-fragile, right? It's after Nassim Taleb, who wrote this book, I think it was 2007. So systems that actually grow as they come under stress. Turns out it's not an alien concept. It's just that humans are terrible at building non-fragile systems. We, in fact, keep building very fragile systems. So as things change, they crumble, right? And so, I mean, an example would be muscles, right? The more you strain them, the stronger they grow. The natural response of the body is to build more capacity for the next stressor, right? Same thing, you cut a potato, cut it in 4 pieces, put it in the soil, 4 plants would grow. So I think it's not just that nature is an inspiration, it's that you cannot work in opposition to the way the natural laws of the universe sort of work. So it's pretty broad, it's pretty philosophical, but it does, I think, require expansion of the mind a little bit, and really be reflective and ask the question: are we going to keep building the same systems that brought us to the point where we are, right? Or are we going to be doing better?
No. I'm glad you mentioned about the Center of Excellence initiative that you have started, and I must congratulate you for and compliment for that. Now, in the context of India's creativity, innovation, and intellectual power, how do we enable and empower India's vast human capital? We are a young country, and we are going to remain young for some time. What changes, in your opinion, should India's current education system undergo to help our youth gain the actionable insight at the forefront of innovation? Or whatever, what exactly should be the actionable points that Indian education should adopt? Because last week we have accepted a new education policy wherein a lot of changes have been envisaged. So, what according to you could really foster or accelerate the human capital of India?
Right. So I kept one of the five pillars to, I guess, bring it later because, and that pillar is decentralization, right? So I'll bring that here. And the reason for that is that simply saying decentralization doesn't mean blockchain, which has been a bit of a rallying cry of that space. But in fact, what's needed is these more federated organizations, right? So I think one of the things that I believe the Indian education system needs to explore is a lot more of a federated system, which you can reap the benefits of a centralized, system where it's fast and efficient, but also the available capacity and options and choices, like one of our fellows, Alfredo Morales, talks about, having that optionality is key. So finding that balance is important. I think the problem with the Indian system, if you see what they do, is they keep creating, and I'm a product of that, they keep creating these replicas. Everybody that goes through the exact same curriculum. And so they fail to develop the unique capabilities that are inherent to people, particularly young people, right? So yeah, it's interesting because everybody either wants to be an engineer or a doctor. Exactly. So those are the two things. So it's funny because, a little anecdotal story here would be when I graduated from my high school, or passed, as they call it back home. I had a very high grade, and we were like honored by the school and everything. I think I got some like 92 percentile or something. That's not 98, but it was pretty good. And people were shocked when I said, "Oh, I want to study arts," because that's stuff that you don't do when you have a high grade. Yeah, it caused a lot of uneasiness in people. I wanted to study political science and economics, but it's kind of looked down upon. So the standardization is dangerous. So that's the first thing. And kind of coming back to and I think people who are honestly smart enough, they kind of figure it out. By the time they're 20, 21, 25, they figure it out and they think, well, I don't think I'm going to stand out if I do the same thing, right? Just today I was speaking to one of our colleagues and he mentioned 80% of the engineers in India are unemployed. That is shocking, right? 50, 60 lakh engineers graduate every year. And I'm just talking about engineers. And so, creativity has no limit to it. That's the beauty of it. Human creativity is limitless. So the best jobs, the most secure jobs are the ones you create for yourself, because no one can replace you. They have your unique traits and characteristics.
Absolutely.
So there's a lot of entrepreneurship in India too, but I think that thrust on problem solving could be even more. Right? We don't have to replicate the Silicon Valley model where at least 95% of the startups fail. That model is very different. That's focused on when there's big money available for the few unicorns, right? That is not India. So, I found that to be pretty dangerous too, to try to apply a similar model to, say, an Indian context or an African context, for example. What we need are localized solutions that can scale. So those would be a few pointers. Of course, it's a much bigger topic, but I'm happy to kind of go deeper on a different occasion.
What you're saying is absolutely right. Even I started as a science student and ended up in doing in arts. Suddenly, in between, I changed my stream from science to arts, and I did politics and economics because I wanted to pursue my law graduation.
Right. There you go. It was a big scandal. You do that.
It was a big scandal. Okay, great. But I must share with you one more thing. Currently the legal education, particularly, I am finding because of the new national law schools which have come up in India, and they are attracting really good students. In fact, I am seeing some of the law colleges where students securing 98, 97% who could have easily got admissions in medical and engineering, they are opting for law. So today, by law, students are taking a legal profession by choice. And
Mhm.
that's a great mindset change. Uh,
Right.
okay, moving from there, and as you rightly mentioned, that creativity is the fabric which will really keep you going all your life. Now let me move from education to creativity. And India, uh, as you know, we have around 6.5 million SMEs, MSMEs and startups, and soon that number could cross 10 million, because of thanks to pandemic, that many of the professionals halfway their career have lost jobs. So I guess they would all get converted into some kind of startups, or they may start something on their own. Now, what is your opinion is needed for a potent universe of talent to help diverse stakeholders move up to the value chain of global leadership and entrepreneurship and innovation? How you think can this a large pool of entrepreneurs move to value chain?
Mhm. Yeah, that's a great question. And I think there's no one straightforward way to do it. I don't mean to be discouraging when I say that,
Sure.
but when I look at the world, we still have a pretty deep north-south divide, right? The rich countries and the not so rich countries, the developed and the developing world. Capital is concentrated in the north of the world, the northern hemisphere, and talent and people are concentrated in the southern hemisphere. So that's one divide, right?
Sure.
The other problem is the just enormous amount of corruption, right? So simply being talented, being a hard worker, and having, been on innovative journeys not enough, right? You kind of have to know the right people. My thesis advisor, Ricardo Hausman, who was chief economist at the Inter-American Development Bank and led Venezuela as planning minister, he talks about how he's at Harvard Kennedy. He talked about how it's not just the know-how, it's a
Mhm.
know who and know where as well. So, because innovation is context specific and it's not isolated from that, right? And so, what are we talking about here then? Um, I think the answer is that you need to kind of go beyond these things. So digital, the reason why we thrust on this provides us that opportunity to kind of level the playing field a little bit, not all the way, but everybody has mobile phones. People have mobile phones, and as long as there's connectivity, there's a lot you can achieve by simply that, right? So of course the bandwidth and all those things matter. So for example, when you ask that question, I'm also thinking, what about like a homemaker in India who has never had a formal, job? How can we empower them? They're entrepreneurs in their own right, and they have creative solutions that are scalable. Um, and I think again, there's no one answer to it, but I think it's a combination of a lot of these things, right? And I think leadership is the other thing as well. I think people coming from India are very innovative and they're very enterprising. Usually, they've done really well all around the world. That kind of goes without saying. So there's obviously inherent, when you are in an ecosystem that has a lot of complexity and challenges, you build that resilience early on that can then be opportunistically deployed, let's say, focusing on innovation or building new products and services to improve the world. Now, is there a single solution where we can sort of help everybody in India? I don't think that's the right way to think about it. I think the right way to look at this is, well, what is your target audience?
Sure.
Understand that target audience really well. If you are focused on an ecosystem like India, even if you focus, on a very specific segment, that would still probably be millions of people. And so you have this enormous opportunity to create impact. You don't have to rescue the entire country, but focus on that segment because your work would be making a huge difference. Um, you know, and a lot of people would benefit from it. So I think that's how I would approach that.
No, no, that's very very profound. Two questions emerge out of this. One is what would be your advice to women entrepreneurs, girls particularly in India? They really we need to empower the women community in India. So, what would be your one advice to them? How should they really come out of their shell and make a mark for themselves like what you have made?
Well, if I were to respond to that question, I would be talking to the men in India
Yes,
and
please
else.
do that. Please do.
So I don't think it's the women that need to change a lot. I think men need to support women. Nobody's born shy. They're
Yes,
told to shut up and sit down and
you're
sit
right.
back. So there's a reason for that. So when it comes to women's issues, I think they're not women's issues, they're actually men's issues. And the only thing I would say to women is don't settle on anything less than that. So if you're listening to this, if you're hearing this, and you care for this, I think what we need to do is do our part, and others and everyone's lives that we touch. I think you can make a huge difference. Over your lifetime, you can really see change if you really embody that. So that's what I would say. And I think the other thing I saw Jimmy Carter's TED talk a while ago, and he talked about number one human rights abuse in the world is the violence against women, right? Because it's so pervasive that you can talk about gender, or I'm sorry, you can talk about race and all those other things, and inequality. But despite all of that, the gender inequality would be a much bigger issue and much more at scale, because there's gender difference within, for example, in the so-called developed world, right? And then within these layers, gender continues to be a sticky problem. And so none of that will change if we don't change, or we don't embody that change. Um, right. So for me, I think the best thing that I did with the Digital Economist is that I want to have a group of, powerful women around me, powerful
Wow.
as in when they understand their power. This doesn't necessarily mean political power or anything. So that happened, but manyfold than what I had thought out to do. Because what happens is when you're an entrepreneur, you become a vortex of energy, and you create a lot of energy in the ecosystem, and people get attracted towards you. And then B, what that also did was some of the best men who are empowering women also naturally got attracted to what we're doing. So of course, being brave no matter what is the first and foremost thing. And that goes for men just as much as women, right? I don't see a bigger, better, more meaningful problem to solve than the gender problem at this point. It does not matter which industry you work in. I don't care what you work on, but that is one place where you can create the most impact. That's for sure.
In fact, Amir Khan, when he completed the seasons of his Satyameva Jayate some couple of years back, and he touched upon a lot of problems of the society. And at the end of the seasons, he was asked as to what is the one problem which you see across India, which needs to be handled on priority, and he said women empowerment.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Okay, let me ask you. Let me move towards now. One more very interesting question, which could also be very dear to you, is impact. Investors or impact people who create impact. Now, in India, there are a lot of companies who work on in the space of impact in education, water, environment, women empowerment. So there are a lot of people working there. What would your advice be on how can they scale up hugely by use of technology or convergence of technology?
I think so. I mean, that's kind of the point, right? We are at a point in time in history where now more than any other time, the tools to scale, the communities to scale, the availability of opportunity is more than any other time in the past. So that's basically where, again, digital tech comes in, because you don't even have to build websites. You could just change templates, right? So And so the existence of these suite of tools that you can deploy, social media, again, huge and very powerful. If you can learn the skills to, again, deploy it in a way to build community and rally community. And that's the core word and keyword here, which is community, right?
I see.
When it comes to work that is impactful, but there's also this entire domain of, impact related work, which kind of goes beyond just the regular, bottom line, which is, well, what is the net profit I made this quarter, right? And I think, the Indian ecosystem is an inspiration for the whole world. There are stories and examples that have gone on to create massive impact in the world. So it's not like, oh, we need to learn all these lessons. I think the way I would read your question is, what else can we do? How can we empower even more people? How can we scale solutions, right? So I think, again, I make a lot of, I think, effort in trying to ensure that I plug in equally among different parts of the world, and so does the Digital Economist. An example would be our entrepreneur training program, right, which we call it Diverse by Design. So it touches every single continent and it represents every continent equally. And so the reason for that is that sort of cross-cultural intelligence that it takes to build scalable products needs to be developed and built, and takes a little bit time, right, to do that. So the response to your question would be that you have the opportunity to engage with global audiences and local audiences, so you can create local impact and you can showcase to the world, use the tools around storytelling, use communities online, offline. It's very cheap to track and document stuff. And I think it comes down to management skills, or for me, I think self-mastery, because it's beyond management skills. Like, how do you deploy these things in a way that drive you towards your end goal, and look for mentors and look for people who've already done it in the past. And there's a shortened path, when you pay attention to it.
Before I move to the last question, would you want to elaborate upon your entrepreneur training program, Navroop?
Sure, yeah. So, we also kind of expand the EIT into what we call our model to create impact, which is engage, innovate, and transform. The first step is to engage your community. The second is to empower them with the tools to be able to innovate themselves. And finally, I think what it should leave your audience with is a transformation, right? And then they go on to do transformative work in the world. So, the program itself is geared towards young professionals and college graduates who are looking to basically do all the things we talked about thus far,
Sure.
right? And then, like I said, one of the unique features is the thrust on diversity and how we ensure that. Which is that at least for the first cohort with less than 3% acceptance rate, we are focused on picking one male and one female and everything in between per continent. So every single continent and gender would be equally represented, right? So that is kind of our philosophy around diversity by design. I think if you just put a little bit more attention, there is so much talent out in the world that it's worth going beyond just the local sort of talent around you. So follow us, follow the EIT journey. I think on the social media handles of the Digital Economist. So I think it'd be exciting as we announce the candidates in the coming weeks as well.
Great. What's the one message that you have for the audience of India Power Talk?
Empower women.
Oh, great. I love that. Okay. Truly awesome, Navroop. It was a great pleasure talking to you. I would like to thank the Indian Chamber of Commerce, LawSICO, and the India SME Accelerator Network. Let me conclude as usual with my vote of thanks with a humble prayer to the Almighty to bestow mankind with the right spirit to fight the coronavirus and also to help restore peace, prosperity, and bliss. Thank you, Navroop. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you very much, Nitin. Pleasure's mine.